Welcome to the One Big Thing podcast. Steve Campbell, your host. Really excited for this episode today as I have the honor of connecting with Mark Asquith. Mark is known as that British podcast guy, and he is the CEO of Captivate. Captivate is one of the world leaders in podcasting for platforms like individuals like myself, where we track analytics, distribution that puts us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, helps us with monetization. Mark built one of the world leaders in podcasting from the ground up as a fellow podcaster. And in this episode, he's going to share with you his one big thing of doing the reps with intentionality. It sounds super simplistic, but if you got 30 minutes, I really believe Mark's insight and experiences will really help you move the ball forward in your life and realize the change that you need to see. So thanks as always for being my guest on the One Big Thing podcast. Well, welcome into the One Big Thing podcast. I'm your host, Steve Campbell. Thank you for joining me as we have revamped the way that we're doing this show. We're a couple episodes into the new experience, bringing these down to about 35-minute bite-sized episodes to give you the best from the guests that we have. Really excited about my guest today. I'll introduce him in just a second. Steve Campbell, if you're new to the show, I serve as a chief brand officer at the business that I work at. Marketing branding is at the heart of who I am, protecting brands and telling stories. And over the last decade, I've had so many cups of coffees with difference makers, people trying to fix some of the world's problems, bringing solutions to the world. And when I thought about starting a podcast, this show was really meant to help people in their 30s and 40s that are trying to navigate difficult seasons of life, to bring them real life solutions that can help them move the ball forward. And so in every episode, you're going to get one big idea, one big thing from each guest that I think can give you permission to implement in your life. And today I have Mark Asquith on with us. Mark is hailing from the other side of the ocean. So I want to give him some space here at the beginning. Mark is somebody that I kind of discovered in my journey through podcasting, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But Mark, for those that don't know you, why don't you give us kind of an introduction as to who you are?
Yeah, sure, man. Thank you for having me. So my name is Mark. I'm the co-founder of a software platform called Captivate, which is a podcast hosting, distribution, monetization platform. And yeah, been around a bit, done a few things, did the whole small business journey, the business journey from about the age of 22, 23. I've been doing that really ever since, which has been quite fascinating and gone through a lot of interesting personal stuff and just as age catches you, you realize you've done a heck of a lot of stuff.
Well, and we discovered you because as you guys know, I help operate NQR Media, which produces 4 different podcasts. The life as a creator is never a downtime. Trying to navigate different vendors, different platforms, different partners in this space. There is no blueprint. And so before we get into Mark's one big thing, just a little backstory. We had been using a prior platform and considered hiring different podcast media agencies that really touted, we're going to grow your podcast. We're going to distribute it to everybody. Everyone's going to know who you are. And then when you began to look at the price points and what these companies were charging, we could not figure out the value monetarily from what they were saying. And it left us with a lot of questions. And actually, one of my previous guests, Kelly Kennedy, we're great friends, connections on LinkedIn. He has an amazing podcast. I asked him, hey, who do you guys use for distribution and for platform? And he said, you know what, you got to check out this company, Captivate. Mark, the CEO, is an incredible guy. So I did a little bit of research, watched a couple of YouTube videos. And so we are very proud to host all 4 of our NQR Media podcasts at Captivate, which really helps us with analytics, distribution, monetization, as Mark talked about. But Mark, this show is called The One Big Thing. So to give our guests permission here right at the beginning to know what you want to talk about, what is the one big thing that you would share with listeners of this episode today?
I think it's got to be doing the reps, doing the practice with intention. And it sounds really cliche. That sounds like the kind of crap that you get in a guru book that wants to sell you a $97 course. And I'm coming at this from the genuine perspective of just getting better. Not some cliched, motivational, inspirational, quote unquote brand talk, which are very usually generally not brand talks, and they're actually just quotes from someone else that someone's repackaged as their own. So I'm talking about genuinely practicing the thing you want to get better at with full-on intention, because there's very little else when it comes to progress. There's very little else. So I think that's important, mate. So that's my big thing.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Not Quite Right Media. If you love podcasts and enjoy hearing from creators that aren't afraid to tell you what you need to hear, then check out NQR Media. Their podcasts unapologetically broadcast genuine truth to whoever wants to listen. And their shows cross a wide spectrum of topics, from leadership development to personal improvement, as well as getting the most from your money in life. Who doesn't love that? So start following their shows today at www.nqrmedia.com. That's nqrmedia.com. So do you think that that is just in the dimensions of business, or practicing the reps? Has that spilled over? Because you do a lot of things. And so one of the cool things I want to give you guys right here at the beginning, you can head over to markasquith.com. That is Mark's website. And when you get on there, man, I love, as a fellow, creator and podcaster, just seeing people that are doing it. And they're trying a number of different things. And if you ever visit Mark's website, again, markasquith.com, you're going to see he not only is the CEO of Captivate, but he also hosts and co-hosts several different podcasts across different genres, which we could spend a couple hours getting into, from Star Wars to Marvel movies to Superman to some of the things I saw on there. But when you say do the reps, has that just been in your business life? Has it spilled over into your personal life? What does that look like for you?
I think it's every facet of life. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think that certain elements of life you can do reps with, or you can improve through repetition with. So I think business, inevitably, you regardless of what that looks like. So as an example, you aren't gonna, if you're a service business or a brand-led business, you aren't gonna land bigger clients unless you practice landing bigger clients and put yourself forward for pitches. If you're a podcaster, you will not get better as a podcaster. You will not grow your numbers unless you practice podcasting and unless you practice marketing your podcast. If you are a dad, or if you're a parent, you're not going to get better at that until you do a day, and then you do another day, and then you do another day, and then you do another day. And a lot of the time doesn't necessarily look like practice, doesn't feel like practice, doesn't look like it's anything that could have practice associated with it. But it's, if I equate it to two elements of my life, the idea of creating a podcasting platform that genuinely changed the game. We've changed how other podcast hosting platforms market. We've changed how they approach interface design. We've changed how they approach product releases. I wouldn't have been able to create that without doing 1,000 podcast episodes myself before it, because how do I know what I want? Mm-hmm. So the practice of just becoming the thing that you want to be is important. And then if you look at whether it's fitness or whether it's a sport, like I'm a big golf fan, you aren't getting better. You will not get better at anything, either mentally or physically, unless you keep doing it. But the kicker is doing it with intention. Doing it with intention. You said just off air, I've changed the format of the show. It's now 30, 35 minutes, high impact. No one told me to do that. My listeners didn't tell me to do that. That's practice with intent. You've practiced your show. You've realized that intentionally something has to change, or you want to change it for whatever reason. That's intentional practice. It's not just, I'm going to stick to the hour, because that's what everyone does. I'm going to keep doing it. That's practice. You'll get better as a podcaster, but it's not intentional. And that's the difference. So the intentional part of it is key. And it helps every facet of your life, inevitably. Every facet of your life. Like, even a stupid example of this, right? My beard's not a great beard. It's just longer than normal because I'm going away next week and I want to have a good shave and it to look good. It's took me 40 years to realize that I've got to do this part of it to get a good shave out of it at the end. Like, I've practiced that. I know what it will look better because of it. It's experience. It's silly little things. But you can practice every different element of your life. So it can be business. It can be any area of life whatsoever.
Yeah, and I love that. And, that's been part of my experience. And like you said, I revamped the show. And you always want to be very mindful of your listeners, those that have bought in, people that follow you, that you don't want to course correct for no reason and jeopardize the intimacy of them listening to you and what they expect. And so I think the intentionality for me, like you had mentioned about, is also doing a little bit of due diligence, research, beta testing. And for me, that looked like reaching out to previous guests, people that have reached out to me and said, I love your show, and even just polling the public. So I had those that have been in this with me, those that have joined me in the experience, and then those that don't know me from the next person. What would you think about if I changed and re-engineered this show from 60 minutes down to 30 and made it super impactful? And of the 15 people that I reached out to personally and said, here's my vision, all 15 said, I love it, run with it. So it wasn't just that I had an emotional desire one day to say, hey, let's completely change my show. And I just did it and gave no one the ability to know this was coming. And so having that intentionality, I think, has really helped me sometimes just jumping into it. But in your world, you had done 1,000 podcasts and then launched Captivate. So what was that experience like? Was there testing involved in that? You went from recognizing, from what I understand in your story, there wasn't a podcast platform that for you as a podcaster was meeting your needs for what you were looking for, and this set off a journey to launching Captivate. What was that time frame, that experience from conception to actually rolling out? And then what did that intentionality that you just spoke about, like, how was that implemented into the launch of Captivate?
Yeah, so I mean, I started podcasting probably 2012-ish, I want to say, 2011, 2012. And very quickly got into starting a business in podcasting. My original business, Podcast Websites, with my co-founder Kieran. It was a segue business. I was in agency. I was building brand agencies, design agencies, technology agencies, software agencies. And I was fortunate to get into podcasting early, but have the skills to build what is essentially like a website as a service business. So I was like an early proponent of the, take a service business that you'd normally charge X amount for and turn it into a monthly recurring revenue stream. And we did that in podcasting. And an element of that was back-end podcast hosting. We would host your media files as part of that. So we sort of had these two things running concurrently, me doing the podcasting, doing the public speaking at Podcast Movement, bringing all the brand experience, the marketing experience, the tech experience that I got into the podcasting space and teaching people, actually, look, marketing a podcast and growing an audience there is no different to marketing whatever else you want to market. It's all the same principles, but no one was talking about it back then. So what that allowed me to do was spend years doing the research by proxy of just being around. If you look on my Twitter or you look on my website, it says That British Podcast Guy. That's because I was the only British guy there. Like, there was Colin, who was from Scotland, Colin Gray, a great friend of mine. And that was it. There wasn't really many other English people out there. So when it came to sort of 2018, well, it was 2019 really, we went into beta. I had done the practice by going out and speaking at these events and being a podcaster at that point, probably like more like 1,400 episodes. And, been a guest on thousands of podcasts, creating my own shows, multiple shows. And that encouraged me to understand what people wanted from a hosting platform. So we didn't do any testing, didn't ask people what they wanted, didn't do any of that stuff, because we knew we were there. We did it. We literally walked the walk. I don't think we've ever asked anyone to test, or we've never asked anyone for features. Yeah, people can put feature requests in and we review them and we regularly release what people ask for, but they're never our main releases. We're always thinking like a podcaster. We're always, to paraphrase the Gretzky quote, we're always where the puck's going to be. Right. It's just through being a well-practiced podcaster, but also a well-practiced tech founder and a well-practiced business mind. It's none of this is could I have done that in my early 20s? No, I couldn't. I couldn't have done any of this in my early 20s. So that's been really important. And I think the way that we did it and the way that we do it is very natural to us. When you said, you were very kind earlier on, said, the content's good, the way that Captivate's presented good, like none of that is by design, which sounds weird. It's just normal to us. Like, I can't think of any other way to do it. Like, it's just natural to us. That's just how we are. And that comes from accumulating all that experience, which you can genuinely only do through practice. And the intentionality side of it is very important. Like, I knew that I would, when I started public speaking, I've done a TEDx, I've spoken at Harvard, I've spoken at every podcasting event pretty much on the planet at this point. But I didn't start that way, and I knew to get to these stages, to get to a Harvard or a TEDx, I had to start at local networking, and I did. I put myself out there. I did this one, I did that one, drove 5 hours to speak for 5 minutes at an event, and then drove back. So there's that you've got to be really focused on the outcome, because that then drives the practice. So it becomes really important to align the day-to-day steps with the vision. It's like you're going on holiday and you want to lose weight for it, or you want to bulk up for it. Maybe you want to put weight on. You can't start 2 weeks before. You've got to think, what do I want to feel like? What do I want to be comfortable with in 6 months, in a year's time? And start early with a well-designed plan. You know, just, okay, what are the gaps in my armor? What are the gaps in my arsenal? What do I need to get better at? And it's important to kind of think that through, which I think a lot of people don't do. I think they just sort of, you know, whether it's a business or whether it's a podcast or whether it's some sort of own personal journey, I think a lot of people just think to themselves, well, I'll sort of wing it, that's good enough. And it rarely is. It rarely is.
Well, one thing that you just mentioned is you wouldn't have been ready in your 20s. And I think that that's such an underlying kind of conversation in this is sometimes the things that we're desiring, we're just not ready for, either because we don't have enough experience, we don't have enough opportunities that we've fallen on our face and we've learned what that looks like. I just had a good friend of mine who's been working with me for a long time, young guy in his 20s, just had his very first child, baby girl. And, you know, leading up to our relationship, there was only so much I could talk about as a father and having 4 children of my own experiences that he could, in a way, be like, oh man, you had a tough night last night sleeping. That's got to be rough. I mean, he was an outsider trying to have sympathy or empathy for my situation. But now our whole relationship has changed because now he's got a kid of his own. And, for those, we always say in business or in life, until you have your own child, like you don't know what it's like to experience certain things. And I think what's also hard sometimes is we're seeking out information to help us move the ball forward in our life. That's what this one big thing is all about. And I could have every successful speaker come on and tell other people how to live their life. But it's another thing to have somebody who's been in it too. You are somebody who was podcasting and saw that there was a need to start, basically a platform to help. And you did all these speaking events. Nobody told you to do that. There was no blueprint for it. If I bring somebody on who's never done those hard things or had those experiences telling other podcasters how to live, you almost in the back of your mind have this like doubt of like, but you've never done it. So it's, you're telling me how to live. And I think sometimes we experience this as parents. Like you can have well-meaning professionals tell you, you should never do this with your child. You should never do this with your child. But when life gets chaotic and you only have so few choices, sometimes you bend the rules a little bit because you're like, I know the book says don't do it, but I literally have to navigate this moment right now. So the implementation and what you had talked about, driving 5 hours for 5 minutes, I think with the one big thing, you can look at individuals like you from afar and say, the British podcast guy, look at all these shows. It must have been easy. Like he just showed up one day and had all of these things. But I think the entrepreneurial journey, the journey as men, as women that we experience as human beings is so important to go into. And so has there been anything else in your day-to-day or in your working experience now from where you were in 2018? Like how has a day-to-day changed in what you can handle and what you can implement compared to Mark in 2018 and the things you thought you can do? Has there been any surprises kind of along the way with this intentionality of experiences that you've had to make you realize like, wow, I can do more, or I need to be careful about what I do because I can't handle all these things? Hey everyone, Steve Campbell. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If it's made an impact on you, I would love to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. But I would also love for you to leave a 5-star rating and review. Your ratings and review help other listeners know that this show is worth their time. So thank you so much for tuning into The One Big Thing, and let's enjoy the rest of the episode.
Well, I'm in a fortunate position. Like we sold Captivate to Global. I still run Captivate at Global. But we took all our risk off the table financially, which means that at the same time, we get to work 8 till 5 as opposed to 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. and working 14-hour days. And I think that was, again, intentional stuff. We had our little girl 2 months after we got acquired by Global. And it was that particular timing wasn't by design, but since my 20s, early 20s, I'd say probably late teens, my intent was always, look, when I have a kid, I don't want to have to worry about taking her to school, going to the school concert, taking her to sports day, whatever, and someone saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. And I was very intentional in the decisions that I made to get to that position, and I've got to that position, and it's all that was very, very intentional. So I sort of realized that actually I can, as you get older, you can do. Actually, I'll rephrase it. You can have more impact with less input, which I think is really important because you've built the experience and you know what to say and when to say it, and you know when to hold back, you know when to react, you know when to act, you know when to be proactive. So I think having more impact with less input is a real vital thing. I can work 8 hours a day now and achieve just as much because actually some of the noise is gone and I'm just listening to the signal. And it's not like it used to be in the 20s where you're chasing every single little thing round. You know, if I want Captivate to do X, then we intentionally pursue that. We do that thing. We don't try and do everything. And again, that comes with practice. You know, to say no to things, you got to practice it. It's not comfortable to many people. To trust your instinct, to trust your intuition, takes practice. You know, all of it takes practice, and you got to stop yourself. Again, it's a bit like playing golf. You know, if I hit a cracking drive and it goes, you know, 280 down the middle, I think this is amazing. I could just knock an 8-iron onto the green here. And I know that every time I think to myself, I'll do that, I always mess it up, always screw it up. But today I'm not gonna. That's the trap. Today I'm not gonna. Today will be different. But it's not. You got to trust your intuition. Actually, maybe we take something a bit different. Maybe we think about it again. But it takes practice to listen to your gut. So this is what I'm talking about. There's almost like silent cues that we've got to understand and silent things that we've got to practice that we don't always think are things that we can practice, whether it is listening to the intuition, whether it's navigating an argument, whether it's, you know, having a disagreement with your partner. You know, how did I react last time? I've got to practice to be better at that. Like you said, having a little one, you know, you've got to practice and you've got to understand, do you know what? Okay, she had a meltdown this morning because she didn't want to brush her teeth. Maybe the way that I deal with that tomorrow should be a bit different because she had the meltdown. Maybe tomorrow we can decide that she's not going to have a meltdown. How do we get to that? And it's just, I think it's stepping back a little bit and having a little bit of that emotional intelligence, having a little bit of that self-awareness, and then thinking to yourself, you know, actually, I'm going to see what the outcome will be when I do something different. And that is intentional practice. I'm practicing that engagement. I'm practicing doing that. So it can apply to everything. It can really apply to everything. But like you said, the biggest lesson is you can probably have more impact with anything with less input than you think you are required to put in. You know, I think that's across all walks of life. You know, it's like you see someone in the street that's having a bad day. You know, a good morning and a smile is probably going to make them feel 10 times better than a, you know, do you want this? Can I help you with this? Do you want to come and do this? They don't always need that level of interaction. They just need to know that someone's seen them. Do you know what I mean? And again, it can be anything. It can be anything, but it just takes a bit of time to trust yourself, I think.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I don't want to lose that comment right there because the world is hurting in many ways. And when you get a chance to listen to this episode when it airs, there's a lot of people out there that are just looking for somebody else to recognize them. And that could be the simplest as holding a door for somebody, acknowledging them in line at the coffee shop, buying their coffee for them, passing them in a hallway, saying hello. Those are the things that can change somebody's life that we don't always realize it. And it's not always the heroic. Sometimes it's just the simple things. And I think the perspective from you that's great is as a CEO and all the work that you're doing, nobody would blame you if you were skipping the steps on, you know, working with your child on not brushing their teeth. But you said having the emotional awareness. There are these different levels to our life where, like, I'm so focused on Captivate that I had the emotional intelligence to step back and realize when things have gone wrong. But when it comes to my daughter, man, I just kind of let things happen. No, it's that same filter through, like, how can I get better? Something that you had mentioned, though, and you and I didn't talk about this at the beginning. I don't know if this is the space that anybody's in listening. We have listeners from all walks of life. You had talked about selling Captivate to global. And I don't know if there's individuals that are out there today. Maybe it's not a media company. Maybe they have a doctor practice. Maybe they are an entrepreneur. And when that process started, were you actively seeking to be acquired? Did Global reach out to you and say, Mark, we love what you're doing. We'd love to talk about that? Because I think with what you're talking about, trusting your gut, everybody wants to say, I trust my gut. But when the stakes are higher and the risk is more, the emotional like I'm my own worst enemy sometimes because I can convince myself. So like there's the gut, then there's the emotion, then there's the like, how do I move forward? So when the risk is heavier being acquired, what was that process like for you, for anybody that may be considering being acquired or bringing in, more hands, more help?
Well, there is no real risk. I mean, someone wants to buy your company because it's a good company, which means it's probably making good money, unless you're a real, pure startup. So there was no real risk for us with Captivate. The risk was we carry on as normal and it's making great revenue and jobs are good. And we could even get a managing director in to run it and step back as CEO, and Kieran as CTO can step back and get a senior engineering team in and whatever else. So that's a lesson that I was taught very early by my granddad. Actually, he just said, you got to be willing to lose it if you're going to try and win it. And it's the same with anything. It's you've got to be willing to say no in order to be able to confidently say yes. You can't, you gotta be, you go in at you put an offer in for a house at whatever price. You got to be willing to say no when they counter. It's the only way you're going to get it for the price that you're comfortable with, because you've got to know what you know is before you can say the yeah. And, when it came to Captivate, we never intended on selling it, and we weren't seeking it. We kicked the tires a little bit on, do we actually have something that people want to buy? We got a lot of people interested and people coming to us with sort of offers and discussions, and none of them were right. We just didn't want it. We took ourselves off the market. But guess what that was? That was practice. We never intended on selling, but if someone came to us, we wanted to be able to know what questions would be asked, what the state of the business needed to be, how were they going to approach any due diligence and such like. So it was quite an interesting time for us. So when Global, like, they approached us and through connections that we've had for 10 years, they came to us and basically said, do you want buying? Are you interested? And again, like, I'm from a small mining town in the north of England. Someone says, do you want this, or do you want something that's going to change your life? You naturally almost taught around here to back off and, well, I don't really know, I don't want to. And guess what? You got to practice. And I just, we just said, yeah, of course. Yes. Nothing more than that. Just yes. And even that takes practice. Being in the position where you can be confident with your answers took practice. So there was a lot of different threads that ran throughout that. But it genuinely all came from, right, here's a well-intentioned roadmap that will help people. Here's a well-intentioned pricing plan that will help people. Here's a well-intentioned marketing plan, and so on and so forth. And again, we just got better at it through doing it. And I think a lot of people don't often give credence to repetition. If I want to do something in my golf swing, I got to rep it. I got to change it. If I want to go and lose some weight, or I got to go train at the gym, and I want to put some weight on, I got to rep it. I got to eat my calories, and I've got to go and push, and I got to go and push again, and then keep pushing. And it's not going to happen once. It's not going to happen twice. It's 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 of these things that are going to add up, and they're going to suddenly turn into the thing that you thought it would turn into. So it's very difficult to. It's almost very difficult to tell people, like, almost a more deep and meaningful answer than that. I think a lot of people, like, the whole entrepreneurial space has just sprung up from, crappy entrepreneurs writing books that have basically got one small lesson in them that you could write down on the back of a cigarette packet, but they pad them out because no one wants to just hear some simple advice. Everyone's looking for some magic bullet, and it must be in the new book, it must be in the new course, it must be in the new whatever. And it's usually just practice. It's usually just get better at something. Get better at the thing that you want to get better at. And it just genuinely is that, which, I don't think that sells books. Maybe
no, but
it does.
if you're a listener, think about the area of your life, because there's probably not every area of your life that you want to change. Maybe you'd like to see some modification or some growth in those areas, but there probably is one particular area right now that you're thinking of that I would love to be better at XYZ. Love to be better as a parent, would love to be better as a spouse, would love to be better in my career as a business owner and the people I manage. It isn't always It isn't always a silver bullet or secret sauce that a Mark Asquith is going to come on and tell you, you got to go do this one thing that no one has the, ability to do. You have to go invest $1 million in XYZ. Here's the things that I heard from you today. Basically, the repetition, doing the hard thing, because no one ever said this thing was easy. So do the hard thing repeatedly over and over again, but also having emotional intelligence and having the ability that when something doesn't go the correct way, to just step back and think about what could have gone better and implement that small change. And you've covered everything from business to personal life to your health. And I think the hard part is right now, there is no get out of jail free card from the difficult or hard season you might find yourself in. There is no one that is going to come and save you. There is no entity, no government, no money, no the economy. Nothing is going to save you. But it's a series of, what change do you want to implement in your life? What is the repetitive things? And just like us as parents, I've coached multiple sports for my kids. And it's funny how you listen to parents on the sideline, and even you as a coach, the things that will tell our children, you know, make that play, run harder, get down, do the right things. It's like, do we apply those same simple antidotes to our own life? And that may not look like, we're not running sprints every day, but did you send the difficult email? Did you follow up with the prospect? Did you do the thing that you told somebody that you would do? When your kids wanted you to go play, did you show up with them? I mean, these aren't things that in a day to day seem like they're moving mountains or changing your life, but it's the repetition, the mental psychology, the dopamine, the things that start to happen in you as you do the hard things like lifting and eating right. You start to build momentum. And if there's one thing, that I would love for listeners of this show, is to feel like wherever you are today, you don't have to stay there. I want to give you permission. Mark wants to give you permission that changes on the other side of the things that you're willing to do over and over again, because there's value to it. And the one thing that you said is, with wisdom and with age and experience, it's more impact with less input. How amazing would that be for every listener of this show, that at the end of the week, you could, within a week, accomplish all the things that you want to do with more impact but less input? And that's only going to come through struggle. That's only going to come through repetition. That's only going to come through experience. And sometimes driving 5 hours for a 5-minute engagement that you have no idea what's going to come from it, but it could be part of the launching pad to get you where you are. So Mark, we're right about that 30-minute cutoff here. I want to be very respectful of our listeners. I will make sure that we put tons of notes in the show notes for this, some contact information for you. If anybody is a podcaster and thinking about, a company like Captivate, we'll put information for them too as well. But if we circle back to that one big thing, do the reps with intentionality. That could change somebody's life. If you'll really think about those aspects of your life that you want to change, what are the mental and physical reps that you need to, and emotional reps, to really become the person that I think inwardly you can be, but maybe you're just stuck a little bit right now? How can you begin to break that mold and realize life doesn't always have to be this way? It's just maybe you're one yes away, or just one go and do it away from really seeing real life change. So Mark Asquith, thank you from the other side of the pond. Thank you for being a guest on the One Big Thing podcast, and just appreciate you, partner.
Thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Nice to talk about that sort of thing.
Thanks, sir. Well, thank you for listening to the One Big Thing podcast. How good was that? 30 minutes doing the reps with intentionality. Mark Asquith, what an incredible guest, sharing real practical insights that can help you move the ball forward. If you want to connect with Mark, I'll have information in the show notes. If you're a fellow podcaster looking for more information about Captivate, that'll be in there as well. But as always, if there are topics that are near and dear to your heart, or guests that you would love to hear from, please reach out to me. You can send me an email. You can head over to nqrmedia.com/onebigthing. That's NQR Media, and on the drop down will be the One Big Thing landing page. Connect with me. Let me know topics, guests you want to hear from. But as always, it is an absolute honor to have 30 minutes of your time each and every time. I really love you guys. Want to help you move the ball forward in life. So thank you for being a guest on the One Big Thing podcast.